Please be seated. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's council meeting. I would like to advise members that the meeting is to be webcast and will not last longer than 90 minutes. I am grateful to all members for observing the public health advice so that this meeting may take place by sanitising, social distancing, wearing a face covering, using nominated speaking zones, and keeping windows open so that fresh air may circulate throughout the room. It is with great sadness that I advise Council that Honorary Alderman Rob Wood passed away last month after a long illness. Rod served as a Carverley and Farsley Ward Councillor from 2010 to 2018, and he will be greatly missed by so many who knew and worked with him. As you will have seen in the news this week, we have sadly lost another of Leeds United legend from the Don Revie, Mike Bates. Mike was part of the team that was awarded honorary freedom at the special ceremony in December 2019. Please join me now in a minute's silence. Thank you. Now to some better news. I would like to extend congratulations to those recipients from Leeds who worked and volunteered in Leeds, who have been recognised in Her Majesty the Queen's 21 birthday honours list. I have written to them all to offer my warmest congratulations on this well-deserved award. And last but not least, I think it is important that we acknowledge the achievement of England team in reaching the final of Euros. It was a heartbreaking result, but they deserve great credit and lifted the spirit of the whole country. It was wonderful to see our very own Calvin Phillips involved doing his club, city and country proud. And showing all of us the true spirit of sport. I have written to Calvin to offer my congratulations on behalf of the city. Minutes of the meeting held 20th May 2021. Councillor Lennox.
Move that the minutes be approved, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Cohen. I call for the vote to approve the minutes. Those for, Thank you. Those against? Any abstentions? Item number 2. That's carried. Declaration of interest. Thank you. Item number 3, communications. The Chief Executive.
No communications, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Procedural motion. Councillor Lennox.
Move in terms of the notice, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Coyne.
Second, Lord Mayor.
I call for the vote on the procedural motion. Those for? Thank you. Those against? Any abstentions? That is carried. Item number 4, recommendations of the General Purposes Committee by laws. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I move in terms of the notice.
Councillor Lennox.
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
I call for the vote to approve the report. Those for? Thank you. Those against? Any abstentions? That is carried. Item number 5, recommendation of the General Purpose Committee, amendments to the Constitution. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I move in terms of the notice.
Councillor Lennox.
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
I call for the vote to approve the report. Those for? Thank you. Those against? Thank you. Any abstentions? That is carried. Item number 6, appointments report. Councillor Lennox.
Lord Mayor, I move in terms of the notice.
Councillor Cooper.
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
I call for the vote on the appointments report. Those for? Thank you. Those against? Any abstentions? That is carried. Item number 7, executive report questions. For this meeting, all members will receive a written response to the questions. Item number 8, minutes of the Health and Wellbeing Board and the Executive Board. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I move in terms of the notice.
Councillor Lennox.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I second.
Can I call Councillor Harrington, please?
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I would like to speak on the Health and Wellbeing Board Minute number 37 to 41. Once again, may I start by offering my thanks to all our volunteer groups across the city and to the professionals in all spheres who continue to work tirelessly through the pandemic. Without your help, we would be in a much worse position, so thank you once again. My Lord Mayor, I'd like to start with Minute 37, Development of the Left Shift Blueprint. As shown in the reports of the Health and Wellbeing Board, there is plenty of good work happening across the city that we ought to be proud of. But as always, there is more that can be done. The Left Shift Blueprint has an emphasis on prevention and personalised proactive care. This is a good thing. Those suffering with long-term chronic illnesses are often best placed to know how their illness is affecting them at that very moment. Working in equal partnership with professionals should be able to deliver more tailored care with the individual at the centre, leading to more positive outcomes. A one-size-fits-all approach, however, does not work. Consultation at the earliest opportunity needs to mean exactly that, not a box-ticking exercise on a decision already made. Left Shift is also about removing health inequality across the city. While my own ward could be described as affluent and prosperous when compared to others, it does not mean inequality does not exist. Many older and vulnerable residents in the rural villages in the outer northeast and other outer areas suffer with terrible social isolation, which impacts their mental and physical health. Adding to this is the limited access to services, medical or otherwise. As a simple example, poor transport links to the city and beyond, that getting to and from hospital appointments for some residents is nigh on impossible. Long walks to bus stops, infrequent and unreliable services with a confusing array of tickets, providers and bus passes that aren't valid at certain times, or across the border to Harrogate and York, where many residents of my ward have hospital appointments. These all create barriers to accessing basic services that many in other parts of the city take for granted. Left Shift is a good foundation, but we must ensure that in tackling inequality we cover all areas and aspects and make certain there are no unintended consequences in combating inequalities for some and not others. Moving on to minute 41, NHS Leeds CCG Annual Report 2021. Given the breadth and depth of the pandemic, COVID will feature heavily in all of the annual reports across the council. We now need to start looking how we move forward in our collective recovery and what we as a city and a council can do to make that happen swiftly. Sadly, infection rates are rising, waiting lists are creeping back to record levels, and some hospitals have even postponed elective surgeries again to concentrate on admissions brought about by the Delta variant. What can we do to help this situation? Clearly, the vaccination programme is having the desired effect of breaking the infection link and hospitalisations, but we must keep the momentum going to encourage all those eligible to have the vaccine as soon as they're able to do so. This is recognised by our partners as a vital tool in managing our recovery going forward, so we must not lose our focus. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Arif.
This feels a lot like school assembly, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, every 3 years, Leeds City Council and Leeds CCG produce a joint strategic assessment known as JSA that informs our health and wellbeing strategy. This year's JSA demonstrates how collaboration, data and intelligence sharing across the council, key partners in the third sector, universities and anchor institutions has greatly increased over the last year. The joint strategic assessment will give us the data we need to advocate for our communities and create the compassionate and effective services and support that our residents need. Lord Mayor, we all know COVID has been devastating for our communities. Children and young people are one of the worst affected groups, particularly in terms of academic pressures, the labour market and mental health outcomes. Whilst dealing with these challenges, we also need to realise the possibilities. Going forward, our citywide, our education and employment offer will be vital to this. The challenge is significant and we will need help to do this. Despite having almost as many areas in the most deprived decile as Manchester or Liverpool, Leeds loses out in many government funding schemes due to our wider boundary covering more affluent rural areas, meaning a lower proportion of areas are deprived. We would welcome a review of this, factoring in scale as well as proportion. I will not be exaggerating when I say that there has been an abject failure of this government to protect the most vulnerable people during COVID. We've seen this in the discharging of patients to care homes without testing for COVID-19 early in the pandemic, the government's reluctance to impose border controls and quarantining arrangements, the low level of support to enable frontline workers on low incomes to self-isolate without putting them in financial jeopardy. And finally, the epic failure of the outsourced contact tracing system. This government must learn the lessons from this pandemic and ensure that services across health and care sector are properly funded to reverse the widening social, economic and health inequalities in our communities and make us better prepared for any future pandemics. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to speak on the Future in Mind Leeds strategy. Sadly, the past 18 months have had a huge impact on some children and young people's mental health. They've seen major disruption to their school attendance, had limited opportunities to socialise or exercise with friends and wider family, whilst having the ongoing anxiety and uncertainty of the pandemic. We believe the refresh of the Future in Mind Leeds strategy has a huge part to play in the recovery process. It demonstrates our city's strong partnerships across the health, education, social care and third sector. Over the past 5 years, partners have come together to support and improve the mental health and well-being of infants, children and young people, creating and developing excellent resources and essential services such as the 24/7 telephone support for those in mental health crisis or distress and a community eating disorder service. In my own ward of Armley, we're celebrating the progress on a new 22-bed inpatient children and adolescents mental health unit. But despite these really positive developments, there is much more to do. Nationally, there has been poor investment into children's mental health services. As a recent Children's Commissioner's report highlighted, CCG areas on average spend a staggering 14 times more on adult mental health services than on services for children. If you combine this with the increasing demand and the potential impact of COVID-19, the Future in Mind strategy is a priority for the city. We need to continue to build on the strong foundation we have created, building more capacity and a more effectively joined-up service offer across the system. I'd particularly like to highlight the strategy's priority of strengthening our response to children and young people who've experienced trauma. We recognise the huge impact adverse childhood experience can have on mental health throughout someone's whole life. We will develop trauma-informed practice across the city with clear access to expert advice and intervention when needed. This will enable more children and young people to understand how life events may have impacted their future mental health. I'd like to say thank you to everyone involved in developing this strategy, particularly those family and children who have helped to co-produce it and maximise its accessibility. We welcome the government's first steps in tackling this issue, such as the investments announced earlier this year. However, it does not go far enough. Children make up 1/5 of our population, but do not get 1/5 of the funding for mental health services, and to spend on services at an earlier age can prevent more costly, longer-term issues or crisis situations arising. We need sustained long-term investment to ensure the health and well-being of children and young people. After all, their future is our future. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you.
Can I call Councillor Renner to sum up, please?
Councillor Harrington, thank you for your presence on the Health and Wellbeing Board and your contributions, and particularly your advocacy for the health needs of people who are in prison. As you said, the Left Shift Blueprint is very positive. It's a focus on prevention, community-based services in neighbourhoods, encouraging healthy lifestyles and giving people the confidence to manage their own well-being. You were right to highlight the need to recognise the pockets of deprivation that exist in areas considered to be affluent, and also the challenges of a rural ward. I was very struck by that when I visited Wetherby Children's Centre, which has a huge geographical reach compared to the children's centres in my own inner city ward. You were also right to thank the fantastic workers who've toiled throughout the last 16 months across the health system. And also you highlighted the fantastic work of Team Leeds in supporting our populations and rolling out the vaccination. Councillor Cunningham, thank you for speaking about Future in Mind. As many of you know, mental health is my area of particular interest and experience. And I'm so proud of our strategy, and as Councillor Cunningham said, particularly the involvement of children and their families in its development. It's going to be so crucial in the weeks, months and years ahead, because there's no doubt that the mental health fallout of COVID-19, particularly for children and young people, is going to last a lot longer than the pandemic itself. There's an absolutely desperate need for greater investment for children's mental health, and it's really hard to have any faith or confidence that we will get that, given there was almost nothing for children and young people in the budget earlier this year. There's been a particular lack of government support for the early years sector, and frankly, the needs of children seem to have been often an afterthought throughout the pandemic. Councillor Arif, thank you for speaking about the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. This is such an important piece of work because it will guide where we need to put investment and time and energy as we support our wonderful city to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. We went into this pandemic after 10 years of damaging Tory cuts, which make the challenge we face even greater, combined, as Councillor Arif highlighted, with the monumental failings of the government to protect our most vulnerable citizens, from the Children's Minister voting against feeding children to the complete neglect of care homes, which led to such a high death rate amongst residents. The pandemic has hugely magnified inequalities which were already there and which the Health and Wellbeing Board and the City are passionate about addressing. And the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment will give us the data to do that so that we can provide support and services and community investment that will support our aspiration as a Labour administration that Leeds is a thriving and also a compassionate city to be a baby in, right through to grow old in. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, colleagues.
We move to Executive Board. Can I call Councillor Lamb, please?
So I'll just get my cleaning bits done first. So, thank you, Lord Mayor. And can I start by welcoming you to your new role and echoing your comments about the England football team. And I think we should all say that how proud we are of each and every single one of them for what they did on the pitch and what they've done off the pitch as well. Lord Mayor, I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to all of the new members of Council. It's not quite the chamber today. It is a very different experience standing here. If I can particularly welcome members from all parties, but from my own party, Councillor Dawn Seary, Councillor Paul Alderson, and Councillor Mike Foster, of course, from Ardsley and Robin Hood Ward. We're really pleased to have all of you here, and warm welcome to all new members. Lord Mayor, I'm going to speak to a number of minutes. There's not much time to get through it, so I'm looking at particularly at minute 160, 25 and 26 on page 59 and 79 to 81. In particular, I want to talk about the child poverty strategy, Thriving, which of course came out of a Scrutiny Board report in 2017-18, and it once again shows the value of scrutiny. And it kind of shows the balance of this administration, that in some ways they get things right, and they have lots of positive things, but when they get things wrong, they're too slow to recognise it and respond. And when we're talking and reflecting on child poverty, how it was ever conceived to be a good thing in one of the most vulnerable, deprived, poverty-stricken parts of our city in Holbeck, to have for 5 years a managed approach to prostitution is shameful. I can't say I'm pleased it's been withdrawn. Relieved is a better word, because it should never have gone on for so long. It was not so much a managed red light zone, but a green light to men from around the country to come and abuse vulnerable young women and children. Sorry, Lord Mayor, I'm sticking to the minute. I'm referring to the challenge of poverty in our city. So
thank you.
I'm quite sure you agree, Lord Mayor. So it's not so much a red light, but a green light to men to come and abuse children and young women. Lord Mayor, if they're not happy for me to talk about this and hold them to account, it's no wonder they've tried so hard to stop us holding them to account.
Otherwise,
I will instead, Lord Mayor, make a point. Lord Mayor, I'm quite happy under the provisions of Council Procedural 14.16. I would like to make a personal explanation as to why my comments are relevant to the minutes, Lord Mayor. And I'm quite happy for you to consult for a moment to say that that is in order.
Councillor Lamb, it can't be a personal experience.
Well, are you happy for me to carry on, Lord Mayor? I've
Yeah.
almost finished my point.
Yeah, we'll get legal advice anyway. Kathleen.
I've just advised the Lord Mayor that a personal explanation must relate to some material part of an earlier speech by the member seeking to make a personal explanation. So could you first just explain, the Lord Mayor just asked if you could just explain which earlier speech you were referring
Well,
to?
I'm referring to the comments I've just made, Lord Mayor, which have been challenged and said they're not relating to the minutes. I would like to explain how they relate to the minutes to which I'm referring.
Councillor Lamb, can I just ask, please, just stick with your minutes, please.
Shall I just
Carry on.
finish? Shall I just
Otherwise,
finish what I was going to
yes,
say? I've
please.
got about a minute left, Lord Mayor.
No.
It's... Lord Mayor,
Otherwise-
there's no... The point of us being here...
The legal will speak now. Yeah.
The Lord Mayor's just said to me that his ruling on the admissibility of a personal statement is not open to discussion, and he's ruled that he would like you not to make a personal statement on the basis that it doesn't refer to an earlier speech. He's also said in accordance with, or I've advised him in accordance with the content of speeches CPR 14.4, that members must direct their speech to the question under discussion, and that is the minutes, and the minutes do not actually refer to a managed approach, Councillor Lamb.
Okay, well, thank you for that.
And further, under the powers and duties of the Lord Mayor, his ruling is final.
Thank you. No, well, Lord Mayor, I have total respect for you and the office you hold. I accept your ruling entirely, and I trust that this standard will be held to everybody that speaks on the minutes throughout the year.
Yeah, I will definitely. Yeah,
So, Lord Mayor, my final point, if I may, is I do hope this is not being used as an opportunity by this administration to hide away from accountability, to hide away from people shining a spotlight when they get things wrong. And the final point, we're pleased they've reversed their position on the managed zone. I hope they will do the same on the care homes.
Can I ask you
in
to be
Farsley
seated?
and
Councillor
in
Lamb.
Rothwell. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Yeah. Councillor Blackburn, please.
I'll do the same cleaning. Carry on. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm sure you'll be pleased that I am going to keep to minute 25, which I put down to speak to on the other paper, which is to do with Richmond House. Now, Richmond House was commissioned as an intermediate care home. I should say recommissioned because it was a home before that, but it was recommissioned as a residential intermediary care home back in 2011. So I'm very disappointed to see that this year in the budget it's being cut. Not because it wasn't a decent provision, because it was an excellent provision, and I can say that from personal experience, because my mother-in-law, who's no longer with us now, but when she had a period in hospital due to falling and that, she was sent to Richmond House, and obviously I asked her, well, I could see myself how good the provision was, but obviously I spoke to her about it, and she said it was just like home from home, which I could see it was, and the other residents said the same at the time. Of course, that was one of the council's provision, and as we know, our council workers that work in care homes are brilliant. I'm not saying I can't comment on all the private homes, of course, but I know our workers are brilliant. She did actually fall again and was then sent to a private home in East Leeds, and although the home was very new, basically the atmosphere and everything in the home was nothing like as good, I have to say. Now we have one home in our part of Leeds. Well, it's the inner and the outer actually, because the home is in New Wortley, and they have some beds there. I haven't been there recently. I have to say that a year or two ago, what I was told about the home by somebody who worked at it, I wasn't very impressed, because they seem to have a big problem with getting people to stay there that work there. And this lady was called in on many an occasion when she was off work to go in. But as I said, I haven't been recently. But all I would like to say is I would like to say a big thank you to the people that were in Richmond House that work there. But also, can I say, I think it's a damn shame that we've had to close it. Okay.
Councillor Jenkins, please. Councillor Jenkins.
My Lord Mayor, I'm going to stick to the minutes as well. This is going to be on care homes. So the decision on Richmond House and Homeley was not lightly taken. Of course, we wish we could have kept the homes open. However, we are still waiting for this government to adequately fund social care, to enable the council to retain its essential staff and maintain a high quality of care for those who need it. The impact of the pandemic has left the council in a difficult financial position, and the alternative would be to find savings elsewhere, which would have put other services at risk at a time when there's an increase in demand. As a council, we're investing in social care, with over £1 million put into our 3 recovery hubs and £365,000 in 3 complex needs centres at Culverlands, Laurelbank and Whitebeck. We're also expanding our extra care offer, with an additional 450 units planned across the city over the next 2 years. And we will create a high-quality residential facility that will provide highly specialised residential care for people with a learning disability or severe autism who display behaviours which challenge. We acknowledge the decision on Homeley and Richmond House will cause uncertainty in the lives of residents, their families and staff. The transfer of residents will be carefully planned and carried out professionally, sensitively and safely. For Homeley House, where the council is currently contributing towards a resident's care home fee, there will be no financial detriment to the resident, carer or family in choosing a new care home from the council's quality framework list. For Richmond House, respite beds are means tested, so there is no cost difference between council and independent placements. Officers will work closely with all affected staff and trade unions with a view to retaining and redeploying staff into other council services. And we've made a commitment in principle for the sites to be used for much needed housing. However, we urgently need the government to act. Over the past 25 years, there have been 8 green papers and consultation exercises, 4 white papers, 2 government-commissioned inquiries, and numerous independent recommendations for reform, overseen by 10 different Secretaries of State for Health and 14 Ministers for Care Services. Over the past 11 years, the Conservatives have cut spending on social care to an extent it's only now returning to 2010 levels, but with less spent per person. The pandemic has highlighted how important social care is in supporting our most vulnerable residents. We call on the government to make good on its promise to fix social care and support its long-term future. Thank you.
Councillor C. Anderson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I wish that legal officers were listened to by Labour councillors. At the call-in last Friday, the legal officer made it quite clear that I could not discuss the first part of the call-in paper, which was about how we might fund keeping these two homes open. Did I stick to that? Yes, I did. Let's have a bit of audience participation. Did the Labour councillors at the call-in stick to that? No, they did not. And did anybody challenge them? No. You were there, Councillor Lennox. You should have taken the lead. You're the Chief Whip. I totally accept the financial challenge faced by this council, especially in adult social care. But there are other things this council can do. It can decide where to spend its money. It can decide not to close these homes. A huge consultation was carried out on whether these homes should close. 141 separate submissions were received and 3 petitions. One opposing the closure of Richmond House with 1,178 signatures, the other opposing the closure of Holmley House with 1,248 signatures, and a petition from the GMB trade union members. Now, I wonder what they all think of you. The report says the vast majority of respondents are strongly against the proposed closures of both care homes and want funding to be found elsewhere. These people who took part in the consultation actually thought they were taking part in a consultation. They actually thought they were going to be listened to. You have completely let these people down. One of the reasons given was the low occupancy rates in care homes. Well, why is a key decision about to be made that's going to spend £2.1 million giving under-occupancy support to private providers in care homes throughout the city. I thought for once that the Labour councillors on the scrutiny board might have a think to themselves and say, right, we'll actually think for ourselves this time. We'll send this decision back to the exec board. But did they? No. We got the same tired old rhetoric that we always get. I asked them to be brave and do something different for once, but they couldn't. At least the exec member was measured in her response, and I thank her for that. I thought my 3 minutes were going to be up by now, Lord Mayor.
You don't have to take 3 minutes. That's it, they're up now. Thank you. Councillor Harlan, please.
People. Youth work is absolutely crucial to keeping many young people on a positive path throughout childhood and adolescence and preparing them for adulthood. But youth services around the country are on the brink of collapse due to the government cuts of 73% since 2010. And the government have so far failed to deliver on yet another of their manifesto commitments, such as we saw yesterday with the despicable decision to cut overseas aid by not investing in the promised 500 million in youth services. Despite the national failure to recognise the importance of youth workers, I'm sure that many of us will have seen the great work they do in our own wards. It can be a difficult role, but will be hugely rewarding to make such a difference to the lives of kids in Leeds. And I'd like to thank every single youth worker in Leeds, whether they're employed by Leeds City Council or the third sector. On that note, I'd like to pay tribute to the quality of third sector youth work provision in Leeds. have been introduced to many third sector organisations lately in my new portfolio, and their commitment and passion to delivering great services shines through every time. The review was set up on the principle that a strong third sector market is of paramount importance to youth work in Leeds, and that remains the case. It will be one of my many priorities to make sure that close partnership working between the Council and third sector continues in Leeds. I'd like to finish up by highlighting some of the many positive findings of the Youth Work Review. As a council and as a city, we don't always shout loudly enough about our successes. So it's good to see a piece of work that talks about our good practice and read that young people really value that relationships with our youth workers. Overall, there is some excellent youth work happening throughout Leeds, and I believe that we can build on this strong foundation and deliver even better service in this city. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Galton.
Ooh, crikey. Hello, Lord Mayor. I'd like to speak on minute 25 of Executive Board, which concerns the closure of Homely House and Richmond House. Lord Mayor, we keep getting told that this Labour administration takes decisions like these with a heavy heart, and therefore you would expect them to jump at the chance to review such decisions and actually take an opportunity which presents to them and change a decision for the better. Unfortunately, Lord Mayor, the experience that we've had in the calling for these decisions is that actually, once this administration has taken a decision, it will not change it if it feels that somebody else is asking them to do so and it wasn't their own idea. Lord Mayor, this is decision-making driven by arrogance. This council is meant to be an organisation that is interested in delivering a strong economy alongside a compassionate city. Yet, when it runs an exercise in consultation for the vulnerable who live in a residential home in our city, it ignores every opinion other than its own. You really do need, as an administration, to take a look inside yourself at how you take decisions, because currently there is a void where that compassion should be. Lord Mayor, we got told at the last Executive Board that the finances for the Council had improved significantly since the Council set its budget in February, to the point where they have been able to squirrel away up to £50 million that they had identified that they needed to spend on services this year that they no longer need to do so. Lord Mayor, a compassionate council would look at that money and see how it could be used to keep valuable community-based institutions like Homely House and Richmond House open for the betterment of the people of this city, rather than just the budget and the bottom line for their administration. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson.
My Lord Mayor, I refer to minute 25, page 79. This decision and its subsequent calling showed this council at its worst. Despite the consultation saying no, including, as Councillor Anderson's already said, the trade unions, you ploughed ahead regardless of what your citizens that you represent were saying. You ignored them. You're ignoring your electorate. What's actually the point of consulting? This council comes forward with consultations and everything, and you ignore every single thing that people tell you that doesn't fit in with your narrow focus on things. And to point out to some of the Labour members who were at the call-in, contrary to the understanding of some Labour members, there are alternatives to the way that this could be funded. Obviously, nobody in your group explained that to you, that there are alternatives, and you've got to make the political decisions. The call-in, the Labour members were arguing there's no alternatives. You can't talk about anything else. Well, yes, there is. And also, specific reference to Councillor Gibson, yes, you can veer from one budget to another. That's the whole point of principled budgeting. You don't just stick your head in the sand and hope that something's going to happen. And also, yes, Labour members, you are in charge of this council. 100% of your decisions are political, which means that on occasions you'll get them wrong. And on this one, you did. You got it totally wrong. This decision was a chance for Councillor Lewis's new administration to show that they're compassionate. They failed. They had a chance to show that they're a listening administration. They failed. They had a chance to show that they will represent everyone in this city. They failed. They didn't live up to their own administration's idea of a safe and wonderful place to grow old in. You turned your backs on your own views in terms of what you're doing. Please think again. Prove me wrong that you do actually care for everybody in this city and not just the narrow sections that you try and represent all your time. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Smart. Councillor Smart.
My Lord Mayor, I'll be speaking on the Youth Work Review and the Future Vision Report. Children and young people may be less at risk of COVID-19 than adults, but that hasn't stopped them from being amongst the biggest victims of the pandemic. Isolated from friends and support networks, they missed out on months of education and development. It's clear that there has never been more important to support young people's well-being, but before COVID-19, there was already a compelling case to support our youth services. So this is the political choice we made here in Leeds before the pandemic hit. Despite unprecedented pressures on local authority finances and despite the decade of brutal government cuts that has seen many local authorities lose their youth services altogether. Because youth workers provide vital lifelines for young people, from diversionary activities, crime prevention programmes and helping to mitigate the family strain, to providing young people with an environment in which they can belong, contribute and thrive. In my own ward of Armley, over 300 young people attend youth work every quarter, and we've seen firsthand the transformative impact this work can have through recent initiatives like the Mural Project at Armley Leisure Centre and the Reducing Youth Crime Programme. Over the past decade, youth crime, mental health concerns and loneliness among young people have all been on the rise, while services for young people have been cut year on year. Astoundingly, Conservative-led governments have inflicted a 73% cut to youth service funding, nearly £1 billion since 2010. Leaders in the youth sector have been pressing for the Youth Investment Fund to be released since before the pandemic in order to rebuild the devastated service. Yet the government have failed to deliver on their manifesto pledge to provide £500 million to youth services. Council, this funding was pledged over a year ago, yet not a penny has been spent, and COVID-19 has only worsened the perilous state youth services were already in. This funding is crucial, not only for our local authority youth services, but also for third sector and volunteering organisations like the Scouts, Guides and Cadets. I am proud that this administration has taken forward a youth work model that demonstrates our commitment to early intervention. As we know, investment in early intervention leads to the best outcomes for young people and their families. Now is the time to invest in our youth services and our communities. No more cuts. The future of young people in Leeds and across the country depends on it. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Andrew Carter.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. If this meeting had been last Wednesday, I would have asked a gathering such as this to join me in a chorus of Sweet Caroline. Regrettably, it's not to be the case, but I would like to echo the words of Councillor Lamb and say that I, for one, am extremely proud of our England manager and all our football team on the efforts they put in during the European Cup. My Lord Mayor, at the last Executive Board, and I'm speaking to the minutes as indicated on the order paper, at the last Executive Board we were presented with this report. 300 pages to justify and condone the closure of Holmley and Richmond House. 300 pages of whitewash. 300 pages of an engineered excuse by the administration to justify decisions they'd already made. But to make matters worse, when we asked for a call-in for the matter to go before the Scrutiny Committee, the Scrutiny Board's behaviour, or some of its members, can only be described as appalling and out of order. And Councillor Caroline Anderson has already commented on this. The duty of scrutiny is to hold the executive to account, to question the report, all 300 pages of it, which Councillor Venner proudly says she's read, and so have I, and has been the subject of so-called consultation. And the attitude of the Scrutiny Board is such, or was such, that I wonder whether they should read this for themselves. The Labour members particularly. It's actually from one of their former members. I find myself being bullied by the whip system into voting against good proposals put forward by opposition parties simply because they were not proposed by the Labour group. And voting against the whip as a councillor would result in my expulsion from the group and the party. I find it hard to believe in modern times this type of institutional bullying is even legal. And that's one of your former members in an email which we've all seen. And it seems to me that that's your problem with your Scrutiny Board members. This fellow's right, Councillor Drinkwater. Your members are scared stiff and won't speak up and won't ask questions. What sort of administration do you think you're running? And quite frankly, we've reached the stage, my Lord Mayor, where I'm afraid Long John Silver's parrot can't say austerity, austerity, austerity anymore. They're up to the neck in money and they should use some positively. Thank you, my Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Bentley, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm speaking on minute 26, the child poverty strategy for Leeds. And just to put it into a bit of context about, I think, this government's approach to poverty. Yesterday, Parliament endorsed the government's decision to cut overseas aid by £4 billion, condemning thousands of families in the poorest parts of the world to continuing poverty and deprivation. The Prime Minister says, in view of the financial situation, he has to take difficult decisions. But I suspect it was a pretty easy decision to take money from poor foreigners who have no votes, so that rich people with votes won't have to have their taxes increased. Even by the standards of this shabby government, that decision was shameful and disgraceful. I've moved off that subject now, Councillor Lamb. The report on child poverty strategy in Leeds.
Councillor Bentley, could you please stick to your minutes?
I am about to, Lord Mayor. I've finished the point I've made. But I did open it by saying I was putting poverty in the context of the government's attitude. The report on child poverty strategy in Leeds shows a good intent to address tactically those issues which the council can deal with. To quote the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, poverty means facing marginalisation and even discrimination because of your financial circumstances. But there are only limited things that the council can do to change the structural and fundamental causes of poverty. But it can deal with some of the impacts, the conscious and unconscious discrimination, the peer pressure and exclusion if you're a child and you don't have the right trainers, the right smartphone, the latest fashions, etc. And the impact this has on children's mental health. We can't completely shield children from this, but I'm surprised there's no mention in the report of any programmes of poverty proofing in our schools or council services. And perhaps Councillor Venham might be able to address that in her summing up. But the real message I get from this report is how little we as the council can do. The benefit system, especially universal credit, is simply not dealing with the financial stresses that people are facing. Poor and overcrowded housing is adding to family stress, especially when they can see no pathway to improved housing with long waiting times for social housing and the insecurity of private renting. A school system that results in good schools in good neighbourhoods rather than every school being a good school. And above all, it's a lack of political willingness to address those structural causes of poverty. Until we have housing policies that don't assume that home ownership is the answer to everything.
Please finish off your sentence.
This is my last sentence. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Unless we have policies that don't assume that home ownership is the answer to everything, until there's a fundamental rethink about the redistribution of wealth and we move away from the benefit system that consolidates poverty rather than removes it, we're simply tinkering with the problem. Thank you for your time, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Pryor.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm here to speak about childhood food poverty, but I think before I get started, I think I was, as many of us were, shocked to hear Councillor Carter belittling austerity when from this government our council has lost £2 billion. The decisions we make are not decisions we want to, they are decisions we are being forced to, and in fact Conservative cuts could have paid for those care homes over 1,000 times over. So I'll hear no lectures from Councillor Carter about those difficult decisions we've had to be put through. But here in Leeds, I am so proud that we have backed campaigns from food poverty campaigners, from Marcus Rashford and others across the country who've campaigned for changes in the government food policy. Having healthy, nutritious food is a basic need that absolutely should be met. I was really pleased to see recognition of the work in Leeds to promote the Healthy Start vouchers scheme. The uptake of these vouchers, which provide milk, fresh fruit, vegetables to new parents on low incomes, has sadly slumped across the country, and in no small part to the government dragging their heels over bringing the system online with outdated paper systems that were even more inaccessible during the pandemic. In Leeds, our dedicated health visitors and children's services staff have worked to promote the scheme, providing paper copies of applications, encouraging private nurseries to advertise to families, and including those forms in new birth packs. We must continue to do all we can. It is simply unacceptable that here in the UK, there are people who cannot afford food to put food on the table, and children are going hungry. For the upcoming summer holidays, Leeds City Council, in partnership with Leeds Community Foundation, will be delivering healthy holiday programmes of activity with healthy meals via schools, third sector and council services. But what has become really very clear over the last 16 months is that only through repeatedly shaming the government for their failures will they take any action to address child hunger. And Council, I am proud that this administration intends to allocate additional funding so that over 35,000 children and young people eligible for free school meals living on low incomes with no recourse to public funds will receive food support for the full 6 weeks of the summer holiday. Thank you.
Councillor Stevenson.
They say reputation's procedure, Lord Mayor. It's good afternoon, everybody, and thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to comment first of all. It was my experience when I was first elected here in 2016 that council, full council, and minutes on executive board were for backbenchers and the opposition to raise questions about what happened in exec board. It's somewhat surprising that we've heard, I think, from more executive members in this part of council today than we have from their own backbenches, in line with what Councillor Carter was saying. Perhaps they're too frightened that if they come up, they'll lose the whip, perhaps. And more broadly, the role of an opposition, Lord Mayor, is to scrutinise and ask questions and highlight things that are omitted by the executive board in their reports. And therefore, there must be a role for backbenchers in any political party or for opposition members to raise points that are omitted from reports, like, for example, the Leeds Thriving Report, which omitted to reference anything about the fact that recently a House of Commons Select Committee noted that white working class pupils in Leeds and elsewhere consistently underperform, and that feeds child poverty. There's no reference of that in here because it was omitted, Lord Mayor. Another point that was omitted that Councillor Lamb referenced earlier is the syndemic approach that the managed approach in Leeds has delivered to child poverty in this city, and connecting that in an element that was omitted from this report, Lord Mayor. A recent report from the UCL noted that for many sex workers, experience is syndemic, where social problems such as poverty, violence and homelessness... I've just explained, Lord Mayor, why it's relevant, because it's what's omitted, Lord Mayor. And it is the role of opposition members, Lord Mayor, to highlight, because we have the last time I looked, a free and fair democracy, so that we can raise those points in arenas like this, because that is our duty and that's what our constituents send us here to do. And it's no surprise, Lord Mayor, that this administration seeks to dampen those free democratic voices that dare to challenge issues that are omitted by the administration. You've ruled, Lord Mayor, so I won't mention any more about the managed approach, other than to say that I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Charwood. Thank God, after 5 years, you've listened and acted. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Can I call Councillor Wenner to sum up, please?
The three papers of mine which have been considered today are the Child Poverty Report, the report outlining the review of youth work, and the paper about closing 2 care homes. I've spoken many times in the chamber and in the media about child poverty, and it will always be work that I'm fiercely passionate about, and it will always be a commitment of this Labour administration. Similarly, having worked in some of our fantastic provision in the city for young people, I was delighted to present our model for youth work at Exec Board, and I've now handed over the implementation into the capable hands of Councillor Harland. Nowhere in any of my reports was the managed approach referenced, and I'm glad that's been challenged. I could say more about child poverty and youth work, but I only have 6 minutes, and I've decided to spend most of my summing up time talking about the care home closures, because I really appreciate that the closure of care homes is distressing to people who live and work in them. And I wanted to take the opportunity once again to say publicly that this is not a decision the Labour administration has taken lightly. Councillor Carter, you complained in Exec Board as well as here that the report was 300 pages. I'm sorry if it was a lot of reading for you, but frankly, you would have complained if it was 3 pages. It is a grave and important decision, and of course, we prepared a thorough report for Exec Board to be able to make the decision. As outlined at Exec Board and at the call-in, this decision is in the context of the 118 million deficit that the Council was facing this year, and also in the context of a huge decline in the demand for care homes. And that is not just based on pandemic levels of occupancy. Richmond House has not been financially viable since the NHS decommissioned the service in 2017. It has run at an average occupancy level of 55% since the financial year 2018 to 19. I just said it's not based only on pre-pandemic levels. There are 18 people living in Homely House, which is 62%, and Dolphin Manor, which is another council-run care home in the same ward, has 14 vacancies, meaning if they wished, most residents will be able to stay in the same ward in another council-run care home. This administration has protected children's and adult social care. Expenditure on social care now makes up 70% of our expenditure, up from 45% 10 years ago. That is where our compassion is, Councillor Galton. We are investing in residential homes for adults and children with disabilities to bring them back to Leeds from external residential placements, and we're investing in extra care housing. The 2.1 million Councillor Anderson referred to is a one-off payment given to private sector care homes to support them through the crisis of COVID. Care homes, like many other private sector businesses, are being given financial support by the council. The money comes from the government COVID grant received for use in the current financial year, and whilst the funding was not ring-fenced, a Department of Health and Social Care letter specifically highlighted that support of the care home sector should be a priority for funding. Whilst there is an oversupply of residential care in Leeds, the city cannot support a large-scale failure of the care home sector, though it sounds as though that is entirely what the opposition would have wanted us to do. That funding protected the future of potentially 86 care homes supporting 3,477 residents. It would not be good use of funding to spend what would have been half that money propping up 2 care homes, one of which currently has 18 residents, and Richmond House, which has 6 current regular respite users. And it's one-off money. But our care homes require revenue funding year after year. Revenue funding, Councillor Carter, Councillor Anderson, that your government has stripped from us in over a decade of swingeing cuts. Propping up social care with one-off money is poor stewardship and will be viewed extremely negatively by our auditors. And frankly, if our Tory opposition care as much as you say you do about care homes, then get your government to properly fund social care. Boris stood on the steps of Downing Street and promised to fix the broken system of social care. And what did we get in this year's much anticipated budget? 9 measly words. Proposals will be brought forward later in the year. Kicked into the long grass once again. Much as I would like to carry on shouting about the inadequacies of our government, I'm going to conclude, as I did at the Exec Board and at call-in, with a reassurance to people who live and work in Homely House and Richmond House. We are absolutely committed to ensuring that people will be supported to move or to find new respite options, and that these moves will be done by experienced social workers and done with compassion, respect, and the full involvement of residents and their families. And we will work with our staff and with the trade unions to support the redeployment of staff who wish to continue working in the Directorate. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, colleagues.
Can I call Councillor Lewis to sum up, please?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd just like to start summing up by just thanking the whips of all groups in the council and officers for working to get us this meeting in a safe way and allow us to debate so many important issues. We all want to be part of the debate and the decision-making process in the Council. And like I said, I'd like to thank everybody for getting us to this point. I would also add my comments as well to those that have congratulated the England football team for what they have achieved on the pitch and what they have stood for. I'm sure there'll be many people in this room who were very moved with gestures like the Harry Kane wearing a rainbow captain's armband during the Germany game, and also the players taking a knee before each game in opposition to racial discrimination. I'm sure we're all proud of that. I would like to now move on to the minutes that we have just been hearing that I am summing up on. And I would like to start with our first speaker, Councillor Harrington, and the left shift. And we've had quite a lot of issues covered today, but the left shift is one I want to start on because this is fundamentally important for how we continue to look after people in our city. It's about how we work in partnership with the health service, how we work in partnership with our residents, the investment we have put in services to achieve that, and how we give people control over their own lives and do that in a way that is working with people. That is tremendously important. I think it is something that we should all be proud of that we have achieved in the council. I was pleased Councillor Harrington recognised there was lots of good work happening there. I would echo that. And I think it's a bit of a theme that came on to some of the other comments. Just imagine what we could do. We do so well with the resources we've got. Just imagine what we could do if we were adequately funded for all the work we need to do to take forward. That was, again, a point Councillor Arif made around the distribution of government funding, and Councillor Cunningham made around the need to support people, not just with physical health problems, but with mental health problems. And I think all of us have probably seen from our casework as we are and working with groups in our wards as we come out of the restrictions, and indeed we see restrictions changes again on Monday, the mental health impact of COVID on many of our residents is going to be huge, and we need the support services there to do that. And I look forward, like I say, to working with our partners across the city in the voluntary sector and the NHS in how we can do that best. And I look forward to working with every member of council who contributes to this on these issues. Turning to some of the issues covered in the Executive Board minutes, and I think Councillor Venner excellently summed up the minute on care homes, and I was interested to listen to some of the comments made during that. You know, there's a few comments I want to pick up on. Councillor Galton says the council's in a rosy financial position. I don't know which planet you're living on, Councillor Galton, if you think the council finances are in a good position. You know, I'm old enough to remember the Lib Dem Conservative coalition government, and the Lib Dems were responsible for 2/3 of our annual reduction in the council budget. And you know, when you were in government with the Conservatives, you didn't take council resources seriously. That's probably why you get your figures wrong on the council's financial position. We face a huge deficit moving forward. I'm referring to the Councillor Galton's comments earlier in my summing up, comments made by a member earlier in this meeting, and it is related, of course, to minute 25. Looking at some of the other comments made as well, again, around many of the issues that face us around austerity. It is, as members mentioned in speaking on the minutes, we have had £2 billion taken away from council resources. I'm afraid, Councillor Carter, I will keep referring to that because that significantly impacts the decisions we have to make. Yet, despite that, as speakers have referred to earlier, we are investing in many areas to try and alleviate some of the issues focused on the Child Poverty Report, minute 26. And I'm sure people have read the Child Poverty Report and know that everything I'm about to say relates to the contents of that, because it obviously talked about some of the impacts that have created child poverty in this city. Reduction in resources for council services, reduction in resources for the benefit system, which has driven people into poverty, housing policies which allow families to have insecure homes, poor quality homes, We have a council house building programme aimed at addressing that, the biggest we've ever had for in a while, far bigger than anything the Conservatives and Lib Dems achieved when they ran this council. Let's not forget that. And that is the investment we are making to try and alleviate child poverty in this city. Councillor Bentley referred to the benefit system in that. Again, it was a very well thought out and useful and moving contribution. Though I have to say, Councillor Bentley, I remember when you were in government with the Conservatives, you traded plastic bag charges for tightening benefit sanctions. So let's, sometimes I remember the Lib Dems contribution to these problems as well. Yes, your party were in government, Councillor Bentley. You were part of that. Let's not forget your record as Lib Dems on these issues. And I think that is something that and we will remember going forward. But like I say, we will work as an administration to tackle the problems caused by the government's approach to public services, the benefit system, housing and things like that. We are out there, we are investing in tackling. I will take no lectures from anybody who's been involved in the parties that have delivered austerity on being a compassionate city. We put the money in to the services we need. We're investing in more children's homes, we're investing in extra care housing, we're investing in new council housing, we're investing in homes for children and adults with disability, we're investing in school places for children with special educational needs. I am proud of our record of investment. This is a compassionate city, and I will say it again, just imagine what we could do if we had the proper resources to move forward. And finally, I will come, and it was a comment Councillor Anderson made about Labour's favoured groups. We know what the Conservative attitude is to children that need free school meals, and I hope Councillor Anderson wasn't suggesting children who are going hungry in this city are a favoured Labour group, because if he was, I would be proud to say that. And it was a Councillor Pryor's contribution to the fact that we will fund free school meals for children in the summer holidays in this city. This is what a compassionate city looks like, and this is what our administration will do. I'm proud of all this. We know the Conservative government record. They had to be shamed by some of the footballers playing in the European Championship to do it before. They will still not adequately fund it during the school holidays. We will do that. We don't have a VIP line for our mates to get contracts. Like the Conservatives do, we will put the money into funding children that need those meals through the school holidays. I'm proud of that. This is what we're doing in this city. It's investment we're putting in to all our services. It's investment we're putting in to tackle poverty. And Lord Mayor, I move the minutes. Thank you.
I call for the vote on the motion. Receive the minutes. Those for? Thank you. Those against? Any abstentions? One abstention. That's carried. To close the meeting and thank members for their attendance, I ask members to remain in their seats until invited to leave by the civic building staff. Thank you.